stand by here.
You were saying?
Siri, set a timer for 40 minutes. Siri, set a timer for 40 minutes.
Okay, 40 minutes and counting.
Thank you, Siri.
Your satisfaction is all the thanks I need.
Okay, so we've got that. Now, we're going to pick this up here on the second part of this, the weight and balance part 2. So when we do this, there is one thing that I'm going to want you guys to draw right now. And I'm going to move this up here. Hang on, let me fix this. Okay, now, I want you to draw the following. With every weight and balance calculation, we have to keep our accounting in order. Now, in order to do that, I want you guys to draw this simple table. And here we go. Oh, isn't this fun? Look at this man go. Oh my gosh. It's almost like he's done this before. Nutty. Absolutely nutty. Now, this is the table that I want you guys to be able to draw. You're going to be doing this a lot. So what you might want to do is you might want to take a piece of paper and you might want to create maybe, on a piece of paper, 2 of these templates per piece of paper. Do it on the front and on the back because you're going to be doing this a lot. Okay? So that's kind of what some students have done. If you have lined paper, it actually makes it even easier to be able to do this. But that's kind of the thing that we're going to do, and I'll show you now how I want you to use this. So here, remember the components that we have in our calculations. We have weight, and remember, that's going to be in pounds. We have arm, and arm is going to be in inches. By the way, those 2 little hash marks right there, that represents inches. And then we're going to have here, we're going to have our moment. Now I'll abbreviate moment there with M-O-M, mom. In these calculations, one of the things that you're going to see is that we may be dealing with some pretty big numbers out here with regard to the moment. And so the moment is normally going to be abbreviated here in fewer significant figures, sig figs, if you will. And depending upon the example, you may have a particular index on this moment. And by that I mean this. Let's say, for example, that you have a moment of 155,346. Okay? So what may happen there is that you may divide that number by 100. And so if you do that and you kind of move that thing over, 2 places here, you've got, here's your decimal, here's tens, here's hundreds. You may be dealing with a figure that may be just 4 digits on the left side of this equation. Now, if you did that in thousands, you might move that decimal over again here. So remember, you've got tens, hundreds, thousands here with regards to your decimal movement. And so it really kind of depends on how they index the moment on this so that you're not using 6 figures on this. You may only be using 3 or 4. And you may round those to be sure, but that's kind of what we do here. So most of the time the moment is going to be indexed unless you are dealing with the full Monty, the total moment. Remember, weight times arm equals moment. Or you can express this total moment divided by total weight. Well, when you do that, you want to make sure that you're putting all of those numbers up there and that it's not going to be indexed, you know, to kind of make it the math a little bit easier. You got to use all of those numbers so that you get the proper arm or CG, okay? So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to erase that here because I know you guys get that. Okay, whoops, this, I keep doing that. Okay, so that's what part of this looks like. Now, we're going to start filling in over here on this particular column. We're going to start putting stuff in here like basic empty weight. So this is going to be the basic empty weight of the airplane. It could be front seat passengers. That could be the pilot, co-pilot. Rear seat passengers. That could be the people sitting in the back. You could have 3 rows of seating in here. So you may have a middle row here. You may have a back row here. You just kind of never know. So with that, you could have space for that. Oh, come on. We have to think about here, we have to think about baggage. Then we need to think about fuel. Now, one of the tricky things that they're going to do is they're going to say, they're not going to tell you how much weight that you have in fuel, but they're going to have the weight in gallons. And so you're going to have to figure that out. So they may say fuel, they may say 40 gallons. Okay? What does fuel weigh? 6 pounds a gallon, right? So that's 240 pounds. So that's what you'd put here. Okay? So that's just kind of how that works. Now remember, you could have main tanks, you could have auxiliary tanks. Auxiliary tanks could be further fore and aft and may have a different arm. So you may have main tanks, you may have auxiliary tanks. So if you have fuel, you may have main here, and you may have aux here. Then you may have something here, you may have oil. Let's say that you have oil here. Well, part of that oil, depending upon which side of the datum plane that oil happens to be on, you could actually have a negative number over here with oil as you balance that equation. Remember the teeter-totter. You may have something over here where you may have a negative number or a negative moment, let's say, in that column with regard to oil. It just truly depends on the example. So that's the kind of thing that we need to kind of keep in mind. But the purpose of this is for you to keep all of your accounting in order. So if we say, for instance, if we say that we have an airplane with a basic empty weight of, let's call it 2,000 pounds, we're going to put that right there. Front seat passengers, let's just say that we have 450 pounds. Rear seat passengers, we might have 200 pounds. Baggage, we may have 60 pounds. Fuel, let's say that I have 40 gallons, and so 4 times 6 is 24, 240 here. And oil, if they haven't given me that, we'll calculate that here in this thing. So what we do here is we are going to ultimately, all the way down this column, we are going to then take this number and we are going to add everything there into that column to get our total weight. This is where we're going to get the total weight of everything that we're attempting to lift off the ground. Okay? So that's where that's going to go. And I'll put this down here, totals. Okay? Arm. Now, we think about this column here and we think, okay, well, am I going to add this column just the same way that I added the weights in the weight column? Well, not really. Because remember what we're doing here with the arm. With the arm, we're basically calculating distances. And so if you start adding up all of these distance numbers through there, well, you're going to wind up with some kind of a crazy number out here that may or may not make any sense to you. So we're not necessarily going to add this column like you would the others, although we are going to come back to this with the arm having to do with the CG of this particular airplane, but we do it a little bit differently. So with this, we don't necessarily add all of these things here. But one of the things that we will do is that we will add all of these numbers here in the moment column to get our total moment. And again, remember that this number may be indexed. You may have something out here where you'll have the total moment divided by 100. You could also have this where this total moment may be divided by 1,000. And it just depends on the example that they're given. And we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. So, is everybody good? Does everybody have this drawn? This is going to be something that you do for every single weight and balance calculation, okay? Now, let's go over here and let's look at one of these things. So here's an example. So let's say that, that you have here to calculate the total moment here in example 11.1. If you look at this, you can see here is that with this example, I'm trying to put this here where you can see this. Here's the example. Given the following information regarding a loaded airplane, calculate total moment and CG position. So here's what you would do. You've got your maximum gross weight of 2,400 pounds. So you know that that's going to be the max of everything that you have to work with here. Your CG limits, you're going to have a forward limit of 35 inches. You're going to have an aft limit of 47.3 inches. And remember where that comes, you know, along here, along that line, along that longitudinal axis. Empty weight of this airplane is 1,200 pounds. And with that empty weight, you have 40 inches aft of the datum. So let's just look at this here. So if I take this, give me just a second, I'm going to erase these lines that I put on here. Give me just a minute. So if we look at the, if we look at the example that we put right here, so here's the basic empty weight. We'll say 1,200 pounds. And they said that that's going to be acting in position or station 40, okay? So when we look at that, and we know that the calculation there is weight times arm equals moment. So if you take your calculators right there, and you multiply 1,200 times 40, what are you going to get there? You're going to get 48,000. Is that what you're going to get? I am trying to get this over here where I can use my calculator. Stand by. 1200 times 40 equals 48,000. And so 48,000 is what you put here under that moment sign, 48,000. So you can see here pretty quick how you can start working with some pretty big numbers right now, okay? So this is kind of how that works. And just remember, if we did this and we said, okay, my index is going to be divided by 100, that would mean that that decimal would come over here and it would show that the numbers that I'm working with here would be 480 as opposed to 48,000. But in this particular example, it does not tell us to do that. So I'm going to try to do that and this without screwing up the whole thing. Okay. Now, back to this. Pilot front seat passengers, 300 pounds at 36 inches. So now we go over here, 300, 36, okay? Now then, we look here, passengers in the rear seat, 400 pounds at 72 inches. So now we're going to put rear seat 400 at 72, okay? Now it tells us baggage, in the baggage compartment, 35 pounds at 100 inches. So here we go, baggage, 35 pounds at 100 inches. Sorry, 35 pounds at 100 inches, right here, okay? Fuel, we have 30 gallons at 50 inches, okay? 30 gallons at 50 inches. So now with the fuel, remember what I said that they might do to us here. So it's going to be 30. So how much does that weigh? 6 times 3 is 18, so 180 pounds at 50 inches. okay? And then remember I said they might do something kind of odd here with the oil. So with the oil, 8 quarts. So 8 quarts of oil weighs how much? That's right, 15 pounds. So you put 15 right here because they want you to account for that. And it's going to say here minus 10 inches. So with that, one of the ways that I do this on an accounting thing is that if I have something that I'm going to subtract, I'm going to put this here and subtract that, because that's going to give me over here a negative moment. So it's going to try to balance that equation thing here, depending upon, because they've got the datum here on this roughly at the firewall of that engine. Okay, so that's kind of how they have this set up. So now you have your little table all set up here to do this calculation. So let's see how the book tells us to do it. So if we look here, here's the way that we set this up. So with this, 1200 times 40 equals 48,000. Okay? Then we have 300 times 36 equals 10,800. Now we have this. We have 400 times 72, 2880. We have baggage here, 35 times 100, 3,500. Fuel, 180 times 50 is going to be 9,000. Here's the one here. We have the oil, 15 pounds times minus 10 is going to give us a moment of minus 150. Okay? Once we have all of these here, then we are going to add all of these things up. So we're going to add 1,200 plus 300 plus 400 plus 35 plus 180 plus 15 gives us a total weight of 2,130 pounds. 2,130. So that 2,130, that's going to go over here into your total weight column here, right? Okay? The next thing you're going to do is you're going to add the moments. So you're going to add 48,000, 10,800, 28,800, 3,500, 9,000, and then take 150 off of all of that. And you're going to wind up then with a moment here of 99,950. 99,950. Whoops, I'm sorry, I meant to change the screen. 99,950. I didn't write all of these in here as we were going with this because I figured that you guys are going to be able to do this, right? And kind of carry these calculations across, right? So you guys can do all of that. So there's that. Now then, it asks us, what did it ask us to do here at the beginning? First of all, we have a max gross weight of 2,400 pounds. Are we within that 2,400 pounds? Yep. We're right there at 2,130 pounds. So we are underweight. So that passes the first portion of this, is to say, are we under the weight? Yes, we are at 2,130 pounds. And remember, we had 2,400 was going to be the max on this. Okay? Now, it also asks us in this example, it asks us to, number one, calculate the total moment and CG position. Okay, so that's what we have to do. So now we know our total moment. Our total moment is 99,950. And where is our CG position? Well, remember how we do this problem. We take total moment divided by total weight, and that's going to be 99,950 divided by 2,130. And what is that going to give us? 46.9. I'm going to just do the calculation here, just make sure that I am good to go here. Stand by. 99,950 divided by 2,130, that gives us 46.9 inches. So 46.9 inches, that's going to be that part along that datum plane. Remember, we have we have a forward CG limit, and in this case it told us that the forward CG limit was going to be 35 inches. We have an aft limit of 47.3 inches, and so where does that put this 46.9? It'll put it probably, well, hang on here, it'll probably put it somewhere about right there. And that's where we look at our airplane loaded here for this particular load. Okay? This is how we do it. By the way, we do this before each and every flight. We have to know, number one, what's the total weight of all this crap that I'm putting in this airplane? I have to know, and I've got to know that it's below my max takeoff weight, certainly. You can be at max gross weight as long as you account for the fuel you're going to burn during your taxi and run-up, okay? So you got to know that you're under that weight limit. Second of all, you got to know where all that weight is. Is it within the CG range that has been established for that particular weight in that particular airplane? That's what weight and balance is all about. Okay? So, there's one of them right there. Okay? Now, let's say, for instance, that we were outside the parameters established for us by the manufacturer. So what would we do? Well, we've got a couple of things. If we're too heavy, clearly, something's not going to be able to go. We're going to have to either not take a passenger, not take as many bags, not take as much fuel. There's something that we're going to have to do to make it all work to get within the weight component. But remember, weight is only one of the considerations for a safe flight. You've also got to have that balance component. That balance component can be every bit as important as the weight. So you look at this and you think, okay, maybe I can shift the load. Maybe I can move the baggage forward. Maybe I can move the baggage back. Can't really put a person back there in the back, even though sometimes you might be tempted. I can take some of the load out. Okay, I can move that back. Now, what happens if you're in the situation like, for instance, that I described flying my 206? If it's just me and full fuel, I am right at the very front edge of that forward CG limit for that flight. And as I burn fuel, I could actually lose that weight enough such that I could be forward of my forward CG limit. So what option would I have? My option is, I'm going to put some junk in the trunk. I am going to put some ballast back there in the back of that airplane so that as I burn the fuel, I am still going to keep my limits, keep the integrity of my limits and keep my weight somewhere between that fore and aft limit of the airplane. So when I'm flying by myself with full fuel, I have, first of all, I have a 50-pound auxiliary ground power unit that I have, and I put that thing in the far back baggage component of that airplane. And when I do that, that moves that line back kind of toward the aft position and kind of keeps me there. So that's kind of one of the things that I can do. So it's one of the considerations that I have whenever I'm loading that airplane. Here's where it talks about the indexing units. You guys can look at that. We talked about that with moments there before. Now we're going to look at the ways that the FAA is going to present this information to you on these mythical airplanes that you're going to be working with. So the first unit that you're going to have is that you're going to have something here called a loading graph. Now, this loading graph is going to be one of the ways that the FAA, I'm sorry, not the FAA, but the aircraft manufacturers are going to use to present this information to you. So if you look at this, and I'm trying to remember what it is that I have done here, because there used to be a way that I could make that bigger. But here's kind of the way that these loading graphs work. If you take a look at 11.18, pull that up in your hymnals, because I'm going to do something here and kind of show you how this works. So with this, stand by here. I got a text message here, Mrs. Benton. Yes, the video looks good. Thank you very much. That's very kind, Mrs. Benton. So there's that. I got to go back to this, make sure that I've got all of this going. I've got to come up with another way so that I can do this. I drive all of this here from my phone, which is how I start all of these broadcasts. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but that's sort of how it works. I've got to get some kind of a little stand or something up here so I can see this puppy. So here's this. Guys, just bear with me here for just a second. So now, can I do this now? Can I? Nope, I'm not going to be able to do it. Shoot. Guys, give me just a second here. I'm gonna humana. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna use this now. Stand by. Give me just a second here, guys. This is what I'm after. Again, I want you to look at this. It's figure 11-18 here in your books. So now, here's the way this works. If you take a look at this, what you can see here is that you've got the pilot, front seat passengers, you've got fuel, rear passengers, and you've got baggage. Okay? These are the things that you're looking at. Each one of these items that you're going to be asked to calculate here has kind of a diagonal line starting from down here at 0, and then it moves along here, and notice what you're calculating here. You're calculating the actual load moment here with an index of 1,000. And this is what you're actually going to be calculating. So if you remember the graph, if you remember the table that you have over here, and by the way, let me draw another one. Stand by, and I'm going to do this kind of quickly. I know. So if you remember what this looks like, you've got the weight, you've got the arm, and you have the moment. In this particular case, that moment is going to have an index of 1,000. Okay, remember your totals down here. So what you're looking at is that with this particular illustration, oh God, I got my pens messed up. If you're looking at this particular illustration here, what you're calculating as you move along this axis of the graph, you're getting a larger load moment that's going to go here, okay? And then what you do is that then you're going to track that along this, this table that you're doing to keep all of your accounting correctly. Guys, I cannot begin to tell you how important it is for just these basic columns and rows that you have to track all of this stuff. And some of you are sitting there saying, hey, I don't need any of that stuff. I can do it right here. Well, it's just like those of you that don't take notes. And if you take a look at your GPAs right now, you'll know why that's not working so well. So what you've got to do is, you've got to do this, guys, if you're going to succeed at these calculations. Okay. So back here, we look at this and we think, okay, so here's the pilot and front seat passenger. Let's say, for instance, that weight that you're going to be dealing with the pilot and front passenger is going to be 300 pounds. Well, guess what you do? You come across on this line right there very, very carefully until it intersects with that diagonal pilot and front passenger line, and then very carefully you're going to bring that down here. So let's say, for instance, we see this. There's 10, there's 15, there's 11, 12, 13, 14. So you can see every other line is a whole number, and then you have a half in between. So if we look at this right now, that looks to me like about 11. Again, I'm kind of doing this roughly here. So on this, what you would do is you would take that number 11 as you come across the graph and then down. You would come over here, and in this, what you would do, I gotta use a different pen, sorry, hang on, is you would put in here in pilot and front seat passenger, you would put the moment of 11.0. That's where you would put it. So now, let's take a look at the next one. The next one that we have along here is going to be our fuel line here. Well, let's say, for instance, that you have 250 pounds of fuel. So here you are, 250. Over here to this line, on the way down, and you calculate where that falls on that line. Then you do your rear passengers. Let's say, for instance, that you have your rear passengers going to be somewhere in here, come across to this line here, and down, okay? Then we look at our baggage. Here's our baggage. We got 75 pounds of bags. I'm just throwing that out there. There's that. Here's this, okay? And then what you do is you total all of those things up along here on this loading graph, and you will put that over here on this side in your total moment graph, okay? And this is kind of how you're doing your accounting here. In essence, what's happening here is that you're using this graph in lieu of recording the weight and the arm, multiplying those two to get your moment. This graph is supposed to be an easier way for pilots to make these calculations. It can be quicker, but here's my problem with it. My problem with this is that it's not precise. What you're doing here is you are being tested more on your ability to draw a straight line than you are your ability to work with the numbers. The big bald man prefers to work with the data, not my ability to draw a straight line. Now, remember those protractors that you guys bought? Now's the time to start bringing those with you to class, because you can use the straight edge of that protractor to help you draw that straight line along your horizontal axis and down along your vertical axis for you guys to calculate these things. Because if you take a look right here in the supplements here for the private pilot, if you take a look at the supplements, here's where I want you to look. I want you to look here in this, and now in my book it's page 34. It may not be the same in yours, but if you look at figure 34 right here in the weight and balance portion here, these are going to be the figures and legends that you're going to be working with. So here in the supplement, this is where you're going to be asked to go to help you solve these problems. Now, there's a bunch of them. And as you do these problems often enough, you're going to use a pencil, by the way, to do these. As you do these problems often enough, you're going to realize that your pencil, your eraser is going to start erasing stuff on this page. Here's what I would do if I were you before you start this. Make some copies. Make some copies of this to use with your examples. Because if you don't, you're going to wear this part out. Okay? So just know that, because you're drawing a lot on this. So in some of your weight and balance calculation problems, you are going to be asked to go to figure 34. At least that's the way it is in my book. Yours might be a little bit different. So this is kind of where it goes. So you look here, and here's where, again, you do your horizontal and your vertical axes here on this graph to calculate your total moment. Okay? So that's part of it, but it's not all of it. So now you're going to take this information and you're going to put this on this table. Now notice this. Notice this here. Wait a minute, where'd that come from? Well, that could be the given component for this particular problem. They will start with something given. In this case, the given is going to be the basic empty weight of this airplane and the moment for that particular airplane. Okay? That's where they're going to go. So with this, you are still going to be responsible for the vertical column here for all of these numbers for the weight, because again, you have to know the weight of your airplane prior to takeoff. You also need to know the weight of your airplane at landing. How much fuel have you burnt? Because again, that's going to move your CG around on your loading graph. Then you have to calculate your moment. From your total moment, you can find your CG, just as we showed you here on that previous problem. So this is kind of how that works. And you guys can look at this. Let me go back here. I've got to change this here. And you guys can use this to find out where you are. Now, based on where you came out, notice this. It shows that your total moment here for this is 105.1. 105.1 with a weight of 2370. The weight, 2370, total moment, 105.1. So let's look at this graph. Now I'm going to blow this up again. Okay? So here we are. $23.70. If we look here in this example, if you go horizontally across this line on 2370 until it intersects with 105.1, which 105.1 is going to be just the pencil's width on the other side of that, and you bring that up, this is the bullseye that they have just drawn for you to show you here where in graphical terms where you are in your loading envelope. So you'll notice here in your loading envelope, let me get rid of this. This is what we're looking at. You want your weight and your balance to be somewhere within this envelope. If it is outside this envelope in any one of those two directions, you're a no-go. You are a test pilot. So you want that to be within the boundaries of this loading envelope, okay? So that's where you want it. Now notice this. You have something here called normal category and utility category. Remember those? Normal category has a larger CG moment envelope than the utility category. ¿Por qué? Well, remember that we talked about this. In certain aircraft, you may be authorized to fly certain maneuvers when you are loaded in a utility category versus a normal category. If we look at where we are with the weight on this, you'll see that you're a lighter weight. You'll see that you are in more the forward element of your CG. So in this category, some of the old airplanes, you used to be able to do certain aerobatic maneuvers loaded in that utility category that you couldn't do when you're in the normal category. And that makes perfect sense, because if you think about the normal category, you're going to be heavier, you're going to have a further aft CG. You may try to put yourself in slow flight or hammerheads or stalls or spins or whatever that's going to be, which you can't do any of those in a Diamond DA-40. But in certain aircraft before, you could. And so with this, you're lighter, your CG is further forward, and you may be able to do a spin in one of those older airplanes. But just know that it's up to the manufacturer and your skill level, certainly, as to what you may be able to do in those categories. So that's why you see here these two different categories of utility and normal. But the big thing is, guys, here is that using this graphical presentation, that graphical presentation allows you to then take the numbers that you got before, remember 2,370 pounds, and a moment of 105.1 with that index of 1,000, and you just kind of shoot the horizontal, you shoot the vertical, there's your crosshairs right there. That's where you are. Are you good to go? You are within the performance envelope of that airplane, okay? So that's how you use that. But remember, you arrive at this information based on, oh, there's the timer. You arrive at that information based on the information gleaned from a graph. And again, that graph is this part here. Come on, baby. That graph, you get this data from this graph, okay? Again, you're being judged on your ability to draw a straight line. Use the straight edge of that plotter to do that. Make copies of those figures and legends so that you can do multiple copies. Now, your assignment for Friday. Make copies of these tables. You know the little table thing here? You know this little guy right there? Make some copies of that. Make some copies of the figures and legends from this, okay? From Big Blue. I want you to make copies of this, but then the other one that you're going to use is this one. You're going to use figure 32 and 33. 32 and 33 actually use the real numbers. You won't need to make copies of this. This you just go to for reference. But in this graphical presentation stuff, you want here, you want the loading graph, and you want the graph here for all of the other calculations for you to get the total moment here, okay? So make some copies of this, make some copies of this, and I want you to finish reading chapter 11, do some of the sample problems there, because Friday we're going to get into actually doing some of the work problems out of Big Blue. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Guys, have a fabulous day. Happy Hanukkah to you, and I'm missing you terribly. Talk to you guys later. I'm going to shut this off. This is me shutting this off. I'm shutting it off now. I'm not kidding. I'm going to just completely take my finger. I'm going to take this finger right here. I'm going to push it down on this phone, and it's going to shut stuff off. Stuff will absolutely quit working. It's going to stop. It's going to stop here at some point as soon as this thing loads. I've got to come up with a better way to do this. Okay, let's see if this happens. We're going to do that. Complete the event.